Welcome to the City Council meeting of February 19th of the Centerville City Council. We welcome all our guests here. Council's now in session. Previously to this council, we had a work session that we do many weeks that was open to the public as well too. But we welcome all that's here tonight, and we want to start to make sure we have a quorum of our city council present. So we'll start in the end with Councilwoman Ivy.
Ivy here.
Meekum here.
McEwen here.
Yance here.
So we have 4 of our 5 council people here. So we do have a quorum. The quorum is the majority of the people of the 5. So we have a quorum present. So we will start with this council meeting with a prayer thought from Councilwoman Meekum.
Our kind Heavenly Father, we thank Thee this day for the wonderful community in which we live, for the wonderful citizens that are so willing to step up. We're thankful for the country we live in and the freedoms we have, and for those that are willing to fight for our freedoms and protect us. We ask Thee please to bless them, those serving our country, our first responders, both in our country and in our community. We ask Thee to bless us as a council, that we will work well together. We will make decisions that will be best for our community. And we ask Thee to bless those in the community that may be in need of special blessings and comfort. And we say this prayer in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Councilwoman Meekum. If you would all stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. The next item on our agenda is an open session, and this is where anybody from the community is welcome to come up to one of these 2 microphones and to bring up anything that might be on their mind. We just, to keep it in the time frame, try and keep it around a couple of minutes. And so I will now open that open session for anybody that would like to come up. State your name, where you're from.
Sherry Lindstrom, Centerville, Utah. It's been a very long time since I've stood here, and I didn't think I would again, but here I am. I have a couple of things that I would like to mention, and I'll be as quick as possible. I don't know factual timelines or plans or anything, but it's my understanding that Mr. Thacker and a few other people from Centerville that have been here for a very long time, are about to retire. The first thing I came here for was to tell Mr. Thacker thank you for the 20-some-odd years of dignity and respectful service that you've given this community. I'm sorry. These are happy tears, guys. Sorry. I think you're all aware with, at the end of the year, Mr. Thacker puts together a list of everything that's been accomplished. And the deep, thorough thought that he's given to what needs to be considered and done the next year. And I think if you took the 20 years of effort that has gone into guiding and helping to oversee this community, everyone would be starkly amazed at what has been done, whether it's the waterways underneath the freeway. I could start, but if I did, I wouldn't stop. And the way that he has helped us and guide us into working with interlocal agencies and other communities around us. And I think it would be sorely missed if not one person stood here and said thank you. And so I needed to do it. Number 2, whatever plans are being made to to celebrate and say goodbye to Mr. Thacker. I hope that this council and you, Mayor, will consider all of the people that are on the walls out there that have spent hours and hours and hours of time in this hall, in the meetings, doing the work that needs to be done here and that has been done by Mr. Thacker's guidance. I've never seen him be rude or undignified to a single person. And we all know that Centerville's had its own controversies. I hope that you will consider setting aside some funds to make sure that those individuals know that it's time to come say goodbye. I think that it would be fitting of this city to step up in that way. I know that Steve's too frugal to ask you for it.
You probably won't even give it to us.
I want to make sure that you all reflect on the fact that it's important to a lot of people that would really like to wish him well. And I know that we would all like to know any kind of timelines, and I know there's other people in the city that are going to retire soon too, and I hope you give them that same dignity. Thank you.
Thank you. March 27th, 3 to 6 o'clock. And I have had some discussion with the person planning the party, so. And we will check this to see what invitations are going out to. We want Steve to close his ear because he really doesn't want us to do any parties.
It would be a shame for people to find out 3 days after that they should have been. And that was one of my main points. Not only saying thank you, but to make sure that people know.
Thank you, Sherry. That's something you can take 2 minutes, longer than 2 minutes for, so thank you. Open session still open? Anyone else that may want to come up to the microphones? If not, we will close the open session and we will move to the business of the meeting. The first item of business is a minutes review and acceptance from the February 5th, February 7th, and the February 8th, 2019 regular and special meeting minutes. Council, any changes to those minutes? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes that are listed on the agenda.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Item number 2. This is a public hearing item on the final subdivision plat on the cottages on the corner 323 East Pages Lane. And I believe we have a presentation from staff. Is that you, Corey? Great. Well, welcome and come on up.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As indicated, this is a final subdivision plat, which, excuse me, what's unique about the cottage on the corner is it's a planned unit development plat. Essentially, our subdivision ordinance allows projects such as multifamily or buildings that have multiple floors an opportunity to subdivide the property into different individual units, in this case 6. And the subdivision has to be contingent upon the approval of the project. In this case, it received a final site plan and a conditional use for 6 dwelling units at an earlier date. Mr. Balling would like to now finish his subdivision approval process so that each of the dwelling units can be sold individually, and then there would be some common and limited common area among all of the owners as part of that planned unit development. What's unique about the project, there were some just approvals that are associated with the final site plan and the CUP we discussed with the Planning Commission. The request is that those notes related to those approvals be put on the plat, and also encourage the CC&Rs to reflect that so that the owners know that there are some conditions associated with the project itself in order to continue on with compliance with its approval. There was some discussion about some easements. You received last week the Planning Commission report Earlier today, when I arrived back in town, I posted the transmittal report. There's one more condition that the Planning Commission applied during their approval. The discussion was with existing easements, particularly with the secondary water company. And the 8th condition listed was simply all existing easements be shown on the plat or vacated prior to its recording. So there is an 8th condition in that report. The other things that were conditioned is just verification that the construction of the units met the fire and building codes. Once you create a property line, there are certain code requirements. It should have been built that way. We just need that verification that it was constructed appropriately. But other than that, the Planning Commission is recommending approval to you for the final plat.
Any questions for Corey from council?
I just have a couple of comments. I've had a couple of residents. I received a video today of the garbage truck backing out onto Pages Lane. So I want to make sure that that's taken care of and that it is also put onto the CCNRs and probably the plat too, so that that stays with the property, that the garbage truck can't do that, especially with us getting the houses across the road.
Yeah, we received that information earlier this afternoon. I did send an email to Mr. Bowling. I don't know if he's received it yet, reminding them of those conditions of approval. During the site plan and the conditional use process, there was restrictions placed on it with the garbage truck service to the project. Mr. Bowling did represent during that approval that the garbage truck has the capacity to enter the property, turn around, and leave. And so there is a specific condition. That's the request of the CUP and site plan approval note, because we don't enforce CCNRs or private covenants and conditions and restrictions. It's good to have those in there so the owners know about it, but the Planning Commission did ask a condition that the notes referencing the final site plan and approval be also on the subdivision plat. So when there is a closing, they will have received a copy of the subdivision plat, at least, whether they read all the notes on the subdivision plat once you get all your closing documents, but at least there's a disclosure opportunity available. So if those kind of things happen with the homeowners association again, and we have to pursue enforcement. Enforcement is 1, reminder of the CUP. 2, they could receive fines. 3, there can be a egregious violation, a withdrawal of the CUP. And 4th, there can be a criminal violation for those responsible for complying with the conditions. It is an interesting situation when you're dealing with CUPs. There are conditions, so there's always this ongoing expectation you comply, and you have to have, hopefully, these gentle reminders to comply. If not, it gets a little pricey over time if you don't comply. But that's the reason for the notes on the plat, so that the city can not only enforce it under the CUP, but we can enforce it under the subdivision ordinance too.
Okay, also it was brought to my attention that during construction, some do not parking signs were taken down or knocked down on 3rd East. It's my understanding that they're going to go back up. I don't know if they have to do that, pay that cost, or if that needs to be addressed at this time. I think Randy's aware of the...
Yeah, I don't have any personal knowledge of whether the signs were there previously and removed and who removed them. If signs were approved to be there at that location, that is the Public Works Director would enforce that. And then as far as charges, I would assume it come down to who took them down and what needs to take place. But if you want to ask our Public Works Director, Randy, for that, I can deviate some time to there. I'd be happy to let him talk once in a while.
One quick question from me is that it's kind of rare that I see a recusal on anything from the Planning Commission. Can you talk to the recusal reason?
Yeah, Commissioner Wright recused herself because of some potential dealings with Mr. Bowling or the situation. I don't know the details. It wasn't disclosed in detail, but.
So the planning commissioner had made an offer on another property that Mr. Bowling owns. It was a backup offer, but still it was my opinion that she had current business dealings with the applicant and it would be prudent to recuse herself.
Great, thank you.
But it was just temporary.
So going back to Robin's first comment,
Yes.
My general perception is the garbage truck drivers do what garbage truck drivers want to do.
That's
And
probably
so-
like water, runs downhill usually. Once in a while, Randy can make it run uphill, but yes, water generally runs downhill.
So what happens? We can have covenants. Drivers can ignore them. We can get more pictures and videos.
Yeah, I mean, at one point, it's an enforcement situation, so, generally, the city will start out with the light notes of warning to act accordingly. After that, some fines can be initiated.
But who do you assess the fine to? The project?
It'll be the property owner or the person responsible. Either one of them are available. So typically, we start with the property owner because they have the management rights of the property, but that's where we typically start. For the homeowners association, at some point in time that takes over the project, in the case of this, they would receive the notification. And then the obligation is, can they work with the company that's doing the disposal and transporting, or do they need to create a different arrangement because the truck driver or the company's not complying with those conditions? So I do see that there are still some potential tensions that will occur and reminders will occur over time. But that's the nature of conditional uses. There's always this continued reminder to comply with those, as you're aware of other uses recently on Main Street, about a van or something like that. Just
Go
from my
ahead.
perspective, though, the subdivision, we're requesting the notes be on there, but there's nothing inside the subdivision approval process that they're not complying with. It's a site plan CUP issue.
Any further questions for Corey? We would invite, is the applicant here? Would the applicant like to speak?
Yes, please.
Just identify yourself, please.
My name's Scott Bowling. I live at this project now, 323 East Pages Lane. I guess I got three issues to cover here. The first issue, Commissioner Wright has moved into first position, and I hope it is on my previous home to her, and so that's why she recused herself. I'll cover the third issue was, let's see, it was the sign. Yeah, we inadvertently damaged one of the signs during construction. And so you have my permission to send me the invoice to install a new sign, and we'll take care of that immediately.
Thank you.
And then the parking, and I've really struggled with this, and so I'm going to tell you where I'm at on this. And I would like to comply as much as I possibly can, but I'm really struggling with it. First of all, when the company that I deal with, they says, well, we can tell them to do that, but it's hard for them to do that. And so just like Commissioner says, the other problem that I really have is the weight of those trucks and the damage they do to my driveway every time they turn around in that area. For the area by the dumpster, we've thickened the slab to 6 inches and reinforced it substantially. And the cost to do that for that total driveway area would be cost prohibitive. In addition, we have certain areas of the driveway that are heated because we couldn't find a place to do snow removal, and there's substantial damage to be done to those areas. What I'd like to do, if you would work it, currently they are backing onto Pages Lane. I've scheduled a time. I've told them you've got to come when it's convenient and we don't have school children coming to and from school. And so currently we have them coming at about 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning. They back in and get my dumpster. They immediately go to the next neighbor to the east, drive in and get his dumpster and back out on the road also. So they're backing out for mine, they're backing out for the neighbor. The company that did it, it's the same, it's Ace Recycling, I believe, that does the city's work. And if I have to, what I would like to plead is if you would allow me to schedule any time when it's not busy on Pages Lane to have them come in, even if I have to pay Ace to do it earlier in the morning or at some time that's off-peak hours or sometime when Pages Lane is not busy. I would sure hope you would be open to some idea like that, to find a time that would be safe and adequate where they could do mine and my neighbor to the east concurrently at a safe time. And that would certainly be the best solution I can. If we have to, we'll pull them in and turn them around, but I have a hard time enforcing that with the companies. So I'd hope you'd be open to that suggestion. That, I think, would be the best. Okay, thank you.
Hold just a sec, because I do have questions for you. Any questions for the applicant, for Mr. Ballin?
No, I guess my question, I had guessed this was going to be the kind of thing that we were going to hear. So my questions at this point are for Lisa and Corey, and
Okay.
maybe Paul, who's not here, about the ramifications.
Yeah, in my opinion, the council doesn't have the authority to weigh in on the traffic right now. It was a site plan and CUP condition, so if Mr. Bowling would like those altered, it would have to be an amendment to the site plan and the CUP.
That would
which
be a
the-
remand to the planning commission, wouldn't it?
You mean remanding the subdivision?
This, the final recording for them to make modifications and vote on the amendments to the CUP, wouldn't it?
Well, I think they're separate issues. I think that complying with the CUP and the site plan, they need to comply, but they're just asking to divide the property up. Now, if you want to link the two, I just think as the application does meet the subdivision ordinance, it's just a matter of enforcement. But I do think it will be problematic to change that because the Planning Commission specifically highlighted that as an issue and a concern and added it as a specific condition. So I don't think it's a given that that's going to be changed.
So just for my clarity, I'm all right taking that issue back to the Planning Commission and having a discussion with them. And you tell me, is this, and delaying the recording of the final plat until that's resolved, if that's the case. And I'm all right with those stipulations. I don't know if you want me to go back to them and then come back to the city council or how you want to handle this. You just let me know.
Did you have a comment, Corey?
Oh, I always have 2 cents. It's worth,
Okay, let's
it's
hear
worth
your 2
anybody to,
cents.
Sometimes 4.
yeah. The notes on the plat just reflect that it's subject to the CUP approval, so you won't have a discussion about a note about the garbage truck on the plat. It's just simply saying this property is subject to a final site plan and CUP and the conditions thereof. So whether it gets recorded before or after, we're still in the same situation. The current is the garbage delivery is X pattern, and until that's changed, the X pattern rules. And so, but I agree with Lisa. To go to a Y pattern is to go back to the Planning Commission and have and vet that discussion. I suspect, like Lisa, it's a hard discussion to have because that was a targeted issue with the Planning Commission. So I think backing out onto Pages is not probably a likelihood, but I'm not a decision maker in that. So he's the owner of the CUP and has a right to petition to change his conditions. He can decide whether he's successful in his argument or not.
So do I understand if we went ahead and recorded the plat, the conditions of the CUP govern currently, and then if in order to change that, I would go back and get a change in the CUP at any time, which would then allow us to back onto.
Correct. It would just be, now you have a new,
But currently
new terms.
we're bound by what was approved by the CUP.
Yeah, that's correct understanding.
Okay?
Any other question for the applicant before we could move to the public hearing portion? Okay, so at this time, this is a public hearing matter, and so what that means is that on this particular matter, Any of the public may come up and comment as well, too. So with that said, I will now open the public hearing on this matter. If no one is coming forth, then I will now close the public hearing, and we will move to any further questions for staff or applicant before we entertain a motion on this. If no further questions, do I have a motion?
So, going off Lisa's recommendation that approving the final plating of the property has no impact on the other issue, I would make a motion that we accept the final plating on the property as outlined,
With the 8 conditions.
subject to each of the 8 conditions. Excuse me. Thank you.
Do we have a second to that motion?
Point of clarification, we're talking about the 8 conditions that are listed in the letter,
The staff report.
not the letter, the staff report.
Right.
I'll second it for purposes of debate.
So we have a motion and a second. As Councilman McEwen said, further debate on this issue?
This is frustrating to me. I know that if there's nothing we can do as the council, then there's nothing we can do, but this is the whole point, is I thought that we had a process where we say, this is allowed and this is not allowed, and an agreement is reached, and then things are built based on that agreement. So it's frustrating to me to go ahead and say, oh, here, go ahead and sell your properties and make money off of it when you're not going to comply with it, or when the current situation is non-compliance.
Yeah, and in my opinion, they are obligated to comply with the terms of conditions of the final site plan, which prohibits backing onto Pages Lane with the dumpster.
Because Pages is just going to be a little more busy once there's actually something across the street. There's not really a...
So they need to comply now, but I agree with Corey, they can always ask to have those changed. Whether or not they'll be successful is up to the Planning Commission.
But that has nothing to do with us doing their final site plan.
Typically at subdivision, you're dividing the parcels off. We do look at major access points, but in my opinion, it's more of a site plan and conditional use permit issue than subdivision.
So from a philosophical standpoint, are we going to potentially hear from a future resident who buys one of these properties once we've recorded this final subdivision, and they're now being asked to share in a cost of a CUP improvement? I guess I'm just trying to look at it as buyer beware. How much does the city have as far as responsibility? And this, if this isn't the right gating item for this, where do we gate this?
Well, right now, again, my opinion is they have to comply. So whoever owns property right now, or, you know, they would have to comply with that. If they want to change it, if they own the property, they would be part of the solution. I don't know. I think the current ownership is under one LLC right now. So they could possibly change it under the LLC and then start selling. But you're right, as soon as you subdivide and sell off lots, they can start selling it to other people. But they would be purchasing subject to, you know, the CUP and the site plan.
So I'm just trying to, from a city perspective, make sure that by doing this, we're not giving approval to something that's being indicated as a non-compliant status. I The nuances of law I get, I'm just trying to make sure that from a city standpoint, that's fairly clear.
Yeah, and I think the applicant said, I mean, I don't know if you're still willing to wait and go back to the planning commission, or do you want?
If you're gonna help clarify this, Mr. Bowling, come on up.
No, we built the parking lot exactly according to plan, and it sounds like I'm in non-compliance right now. I'll call the guys tomorrow morning and say, hey, you gotta back it around until I get it back to the planning commission and get a different approval. You know, and so I'll just have to start complying with the law until such time I can get back, and maybe they'll tell me I never can, but I hope they would be a little more open to the suggestion. But there's still, the area that we showed on the preliminary when we got the CUP approval it's all there. I have room to back a truck or turn a truck around. I hate to see what it does to the concrete in the long term of things, and I'd rather find a time that we could do it that would be convenient at the same time they do the neighbors. So, but we'll call them in the morning and we'll start complying.
So technically, it doesn't have any application, I presume. If there was no such limitation on the neighbors, which was built long time ago before I moved here, when that was probably not an issue, there's probably nothing you can do to make them comply. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know if it's a traffic citation to back out of a driveway. I mean, it also, if it's against our code to back onto a street, I don't know. But if it's not, then no, you don't typically, you know, we're not going to go back on a development that's already there if it's not violating the law or any kind of traffic code.
It's just that this one was designed in such a way
That we thought we had it covered.
that we thought we had it covered, and they thought that they had done the planning enough that they could fit 6 units on it and still have the truck back around.
Well, we did, and I think the
Well,
testimony.
and he says
But
they
he's
do,
saying-
it's just
Yeah,
difficult.
they can.
But he's
It was
saying that he
designed
doesn't want
for
to
it.
because he didn't
Well,
build
I'm
it.
not saying I don't, I'm saying I don't like it because of the concrete.
But the
Can you come up
concrete-
to the mic?
Like doing it.
But the concrete is part of what you designed.
Scott, can you come up here so we can?
There'll be
get
somebody at
recorded?
home who won't hear your comments, so the two people
I'm
watching.
gonna have a hard time, sure, every time I'm there and he comes to pick up garbage, I can tell him he has to back around, you know. But when I'm not there, I just, he's gonna do the easiest thing he can. But I'll do what I can,
So I with Bill in terms of that they're exclusive issues. That if we go ahead and vote in the affirmative for the final site plan and to put that in play, that doesn't change the enforcement issue at all, right?
That's correct.
It just adds more people to the mix because there will be more owners.
So I have a couple more questions that, apologize, Mr. Bowling, in advance, that'll probably be offensive. I don't mean it to be. If we go ahead and do this, and if properties are sold, and if a garbage truck backs out onto the street and someone is severely injured or killed because of our approvals, are we partially at fault?
I would suspect the liability lies in the person driving the truck that injured someone.
So you're saying no?
Yes.
This action has, as far as I'm concerned, does not increase the liability of the city for recording this. It does not say we are in agreement with a non-compliant CUP.
Right, the CUP is in place. The project has been designed to handle the trucks backing out, and the trucks should use that. And
Not
so-
backing out, you mean?
No, correct. They back into a spot and then they pull out. So really, in my opinion, it's either an enforcement of the CUP or, if it's not a traffic code violation, which it probably isn't, but, so, yes, it would fall to the CUP, which would then be the HOA. So it's not ideal, but it was designed. So I'm not that sympathetic to say, gosh, it can't handle, the concrete can't handle it, because the project was designed that way to make sure that the garbage truck could turn around within the project.
The other half of my question is, as a person who is likely to have to vote on CUPs and related issues in the future, the other thing this tells me is that in trying to be reasonable, we probably are too lax on some of these provisions, because I know that, for example, we've had significant ongoing problems with violations from the car dealerships who park in the middle of the main street and unload their cars, which violates the CUP, hours of operation and other things. And so I'm left trying to understand the balancing act between being reasonable in giving approvals and that reasonableness coming back to haunt us, because the people actually living under those approvals at some point in time in the future don't understand the reason, find that it's inconvenient, and just do it their own way. And how do we prevent that?
Let me give you perspective on that. I think your worries and concerns have merit, but I think you don't have as much ability as you perceive. Let's separate the CUP for a second. You just have a permitted use, has these standards. There's no way under the sun you're going to cover every situation with standards. You can't write an ordinance or a code long enough to cover every situation that could possibly exist with approvals. So if I can say this, the sky is going to fall, then you're going to be tempted to narrow down to nothing happens, and you can't do that either. So the conditional use is a mitigating factor to say, look, we can't cover all the bases, but we know we have X number of concerns, so we're willing to allow discussion for mitigation of those concerns. So you're either too narrow or you're too broad. That's your choice under permitted use. Conditional use lets you intercept, mitigate it, but state law now steps in. If you make it a conditional use, you can require reasonable mitigation. It doesn't mean that you solve everything. It doesn't mean everything's solved. It's called mitigate to the extent feasible. Then you're obligated to prove, you can't deny it. So if you go to the extent of a requirement that is so burdensome on someone, you're going to have to prove why you're denying the permit, which is a harder case than coming up with reasonable standards. And so you put in the reasonable standards, and then the consequences follow. And that will always be the case every single time. You can't cover it. So again, you got to be comfortable with your conditional uses. This was a multifamily with 8 units an acre. You've mitigated those concerns in my extent when you've made it permitted at 6. Now somebody comes in and they back out. You don't have a conditional use to under 6 units an acre. Under 6 units an acre to mitigate, you don't even have a standard to step in. So you're better off with the CUP sometimes. So you can have a standard to step in and control. Right now it's 6 units an acre, multifamily, permitted. You don't have a lot of standards. You just have X number of standards. They comply, raises a problem. Sorry, Charlie, can't do anything about it.
Now you're bringing up a third issue, so you're taking us down another tangent. In this particular case,
Avoid the rabbit hole, though.
No, I see where you're trying to go with avoiding the rabbit hole, but I'm very much in agreement with Bill that anything we do that lends tacit approval gets really tough, is how you vote for something that needs to be done because it's legal and it should be done. We need to go ahead and proceed with this, but at the same time, slap a wrist and make sure that you're not giving tacit approval to something that you know is wrong.
Agreed, but you have to also remember that the person has the right to petition when you make a decision that's wrong and appeal it. So if you have an unrelated condition you're holding them hostage to, they can overturn that with an appeal. So you have to decide whether your appellant success is going to be there. And so you're better off not doing a tacit approval, because I don't think it's a tacit approval from a law perspective. It may be from a public relations perspective, but not a law perspective. And you're better off allowing enforcement to take place, because that's where it's clear and bright lines.
So
We're
you're,
not, oh, sorry, yeah, we're not granting any tacit approval. We've just been notified that they're in violation, and we're saying, yes, you need to take care of that violation. We're not winking here by the approval of the subdivision. I'm just saying.
No, and that's what I'm trying to
With the
avoid.
subdivision approval, I think you're better off approving it tonight and being done with it, because what you're saying is you need to make sure that those garbage trucks don't back onto Page's Lane in accordance with your CUP and your site plan. If you remand it to the planning commission, now you're implying that, hey, maybe that should be amended. So what I'm saying is it's a separate issue. Just approve the plat, because you don't really want to weigh in on whether he should be able to back out. Is what I'm thinking.
Particularly when we have some ordinances we got to check.
Right.
Could I get clarification from either Corey or Lisa or both? So the planning commission recommended approval based, subject to the following, the 8 conditions. Are those all 8 conditions? Can those not be satisfied until approval is granted?
Yeah, they have some work to do on their titling and their easement research to get it all squared up. But yeah, I think they have the capacity to get to a recording situation.
Is there some reason that some of those 8 haven't been done already?
The project was approved at the planning commission last week, so a lot of them are preparatory work for the recording of the Linden document.
Yeah, we often have conditions that we impose at final that they have to comply with prior to printing the Mylar. There's a lot to be done after final approval.
So would we make sure that those 8 were all taken care of before recording then? Or?
Yeah, that's what it does.
Okay.
Yes, it just gives us a checklist.
I'm prepared to vote on the motion.
Okay. Everyone else prepared to vote? Any more debate? Okay.
So since it's been so long, the motion was to approve with the 8 conditions and findings A through C in the staff report.
Correct, and that was motion and seconded. Okay. So we'll start with Councilman McEwen.
Aye.
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 Motion passes 4-0. Thank you. Let's move to item number 3. This is the bid awards. We have our Public Works Director, Randy Randall, here to talk about this. This is kind of an exciting one. It talks about many of the projects that we have coming forward this year. So, Randy?
Put up the one with the slide, the big one. I'm going to go through and talk about all the projects, many projects.
Oh, probably the map, the second one probably. That one?
Yep. Okay, I want to tell you what we're trying to do this year. Lund Lane, we're looking at, it's going to be widened because of the contractor on the other side. We're going to put a little bit of asphalt, so it's going to take a little bit of our funds in order to widen about 10 feet down Lund Lane. Main Street's going to be overlaid by the state this year, and they're going to mill it and overlay it, but they're going to put in some culverts down here. I'll come down there in a minute. Farmington, we're trying to get the wetlands delineated and see if we can't get this road started in the next couple of years. We're also getting the trail underneath the DNRG. We're going to put in a culvert here. You've already approved those 3 projects here. The contractor that owns this property is going to put in a pipe system down here. So we're going to get this connected down to here to help out. We're also going to do the decant station, get it bid out and get it going. The state is going to we're going to try to get culverts replaced underneath the DNRG and get the state with their project of the West Davis Highway to try to get pipes, new pipes underneath the freeway and get these pipes replaced. As we said, Main Street overlaying. And then down here by Center Street, we're going to, first north to Center Street, we're going to be putting a new water line, storm drain system that will be replaced in the highway, and that has to be done. That's what we're approving tonight because that needs to be done prior to them milling and overlaying, so we want to get in and get that done. First South is on the bid schedule for tonight. We're going to be replacing the water line and replacing the street from here to here, but that street portion is not on the, you don't have that on your plate yet, but the replacement of the water line, Dual Creek has already issued their bid, and they're going to be replacing their water line, and then we're going to replace ours, and then we're going to replace the street. and then the street will be rebuilt. We also have, we'll be bidding out what we call the Y, or the
Wishbone?
wishbone. We call it wishbone, upside down wishbone. This we're going to be replacing the water line and putting a storm drain system and trying to take care of those dips in front of your house.
Thank you.
We're going to try to put a storm drain from here to here and take the dips out. We had some dips in the road that people drive through 100 miles an hour and throws them through the ceiling, so we're going to be replacing that.
My grandchildren really like those. They'll be sad.
Yeah, they're nice. So we're gonna probably be doing that. And also, 4th East, we're gonna be doing 4th East, putting in the storm drain from 8th South down to 9th South. Try to get rid of Lake Elbert, see if we can't get rid of that. And then we're gonna, that's basically the projects, other than, UDOT is also gonna be replacing 2 storm drain systems that they'll be funding. One down south by the junior high, and another one's gonna be done up north. Go up north a little more for a minute. Okay, right here, there's gonna be a storm drain replaced down here as well. So those 2 projects will be done by the state. So those are the basic projects that we're gonna try to be doing this year. Also, they're gonna be milling, the state's gonna be milling Parish Lane and re-overlaying Parish Lane as well to Main Street. So we've got quite a few projects that will be going on this year, and we're asking for funding for right now just doing the First South water line and the Main Street and storm drain is what's before you this evening that we're asking for approval.
Randy,
Talk about the funding.
in connection with the UDOT project on Main Street, Randy, I want the council to be aware that under the ordinances, I have the authority as a city manager to give permission for nighttime work. And so this was a request of UDOT that we allow nighttime work on Main Street because of the tremendous impact that would occur during the daytime for this milling and paving project. To make that decision, I brought Randy and Kevin into the conversation with the UDOT project manager and also the designer of the project and reviewed thoroughly what the impacts would be daytime and nighttime. It was my opinion, and I think Kevin and Randy agreed, that we really are better off allowing the contractor to work at night on Main Street, with the exception that they cannot do the jackhammering type.
Pneumatic tools.
Yeah, the, what do they call it? Percussive work like
work.
that. So that is going to be an inconvenience. It's going to be a nuisance for probably in any stretch of Main Street, maybe for a few nights, to have the milling activity and the paving activity going on. But I'm convinced that if you required all that to be done daytime, it would be just a nightmare.
And they are restricted on time, the window that they have to do this in, trying to do it so school, they're not going to be interrupting the school children down south or up north as well.
We gave them a lot of requirements, like don't be in the way of the parade, school,
Yes.
there's.
Tour of Utah.
Tour of Utah.
Tour of Utah, there's a lot of conditions. Did they give
Yeah.
any indication of how many hours a night they're going to work? Are they working all the way to sunrise, or
Well,
are they going dark
Yes,
at any point?
yeah, they'll be working through the night when they do it.
I suspect they'll be working from whenever they deem the evening commute is over until the morning commute begins.
Most of the noise will be very constant. The milling's fairly constant. The backing up is what's going to be annoying to people with the backup alarms on their cars will be, on their trucks will be the most annoying part of it, so.
Can we put out an
We will.
announcement that
We will
this
be
is the
doing-
time for everyone
Yes.
to go on vacation?
Yes,
And
yes.
Give them the days?
Public education will be a high priority. The UDOT, in fact, has hired a public involvement team to get the word out, door-to-door notices, work with our staff on website and tweets and all those things, business access, et cetera. Yeah, so it's a $3.4 million project, just the Main Street project. It's quite an investment in our community. We will be pleading with our residents to be patient for that nighttime work, but I really do believe it's better, all things considered, than what the impact would be during the day.
One of the things in the requirement is they can't hold people back for more than 15 minutes stopped on the road. And that is quite a long time for people to be held back. And so with that, hopefully the people won't be held up on Main Street nearly as long. So they'll do all their concrete work. Most of their concrete work will be done during the daytime. It'll actually be done ahead of time, we're hoping, too, some of that concrete work, so.
Before June.
Right.
Because
they start.
They really probably aren't going to be doing milling and paving until June when school
Right.
is out.
Yes. Did you have a question? Bill?
So, obviously, they won't be doing the whole street at the same time.
Right.
They're
No.
going to be doing it in
Segments.
1 block increments?
We don't know for sure. We'll be meeting with them to find out how they want to do it, whether they're going to do a whole width, the entire length, or a halfway. We don't know for sure. It'll be a little bit different throughout. Parish Lane will be a little bit different, for example, because they'll probably try to shut it down and get through and do Parish Lane. So there'll probably be different ways they do it. But we'll try to meet with them and make sure the word gets out on where and when they'll be working. So
We'll be very proactive, the city in partnership with UDOT's involvement, public involvement team to educate in advance and update regularly.
When did you say nighttime hours were?
Well, the ordinance, city ordinance prohibits nighttime work from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. unless they get permission from the city manager. So I think they're going to be working probably from like 7 p.m. till 6 or 7
6
a.m.
or 7 in the morning, yeah.
Yeah,
Till the rush hour.
yeah, between rush periods, commuter rush periods.
We made the KSL traffic report the other morning. It said that there was a traffic jam in front of Centerville Junior High and to avoid our Main Street. And that was on KSL. It was just one of those snowy mornings, I guess, when the helicopter flew over. It was backed up for miles both ways.
That wasn't you just holding the
That was,
crosswalk
that was,
open?
that was
Closed?
possibly probably me, but I thought it was funny because I had 2 people call me and say, hey, you were just on the radio. They said there's a backup, get out of the road.
You weren't complying with the 15-minute requirement?
So I wanted you to understand that in connection with the UDOT projects before Randy goes on with these bid awards.
And then we also have on here how much money we're going to be spending totally, as well as each individual projects. And so we should be within our budget as we work along, try to stay within our budget.
Do you want to talk about the 2 bid awards then,
Yeah.
that we're looking
Yeah.
at for
Yeah.
approval?
Yeah, basically, we're talking about the one on First South, which is the storm drain system, not the storm drain, excuse me, it's the water line project on First South, for the bid award for that one, with the parts and everything, and then also the, as we've got down here, the bid award is for the culinary line on First South, $26,000 for Mountain Land, and Waterford for $2,974. And then Green Construction, $96,515. I might mention that greens were low on both Main Street and the irrigation company, but the irrigation company decided to get a different company and that's why we only got 2 bids for the Main Street project. The other bidder already had work, and both of them have to be done at the same time frame because they're in a hurry. Dual Creek has to be done before they turn the water on, so they're going to start in the middle of the winter, and ours has to get started before the overlay takes place. So,
Let me just clarify though, Randy, in case they're confused by what you just said. The city's bid awards are to the lowest bidders in both cases.
that's correct. That's correct.
Right.
But they were low bid also on First South. The Greens were, but Greens didn't bid
For-
this job.
For irrigation.
That's right. They were low for both irrigation and culinary on First South.
Right, and we're awarding to Green on First South.
Right.
But on the Main Street.
Main Street, Greens didn't.
Ormond was the low bidder
That's
for our work.
That's correct. But Greens didn't bid on it, and neither did another bidder. The bidder that's doing the work for them up on First South didn't bid on Main Street, which we were hoping would bid. But we're fine with Ormond. Ormond did the work last year or the year before on Main Street. Felt like they did a good job and they understand Main Street. So it always costs a little bit more money to do Main Street than it does our other streets because of the traffic problems you have to deal with in compliance with the state regulations as well. So it would be our recommendation that you award the bids to those shown on your sheet there for both First South and for Main Street.
And Randy, you didn't mention this specifically in your description of the projects, but the Main Street work, which is storm drain installation and replacement of a water line in the vicinity of Center Street, will be prior to UDOT's work on Main Street, and UDOT's work on Main Street will also involve a reconstruction of the Center and Main Street intersection so that there's no longer that awful dip there where
Yes.
Center Street meets Main Street.
Yes, they'll be bearing the cost of doing that.
Yeah.
And they'll be doing a bunch of handicap ramps there that'll meet the ADA as well, so.
Any questions for, I'd like to take motions separately on these two. If not, I'll entertain a motion for the First South culinary water line replacement.
Motion to award bids as listed for the 100 South culinary water line replacement project.
Second.
Mountainland for $26,629.23, Waterford for $2,974.90, and Green Construction for $96,515
Plus tax.
plus tax.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That appears to be unanimous. Do I have a motion on the Main Street storm drain and culinary water line replacement project?
Make a motion to approve the bid for the Main Street storm drain and culinary water line replacement project, labor and materials as listed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Voting appears to be unanimous. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, thank you.
Thanks for being here. Let's move to item number 4. Welcome, or thank you. Goodbye, I should say, rather than welcome. Thanks for coming tonight. Hopefully you learned something from it. Good.
Probably not the first one, but
All right, let's go to item number 4. This was originally was on a summary action calendar, but it was the only item. This is amendment number 3 to interlocal agreement for animal control services. If I don't know that we have a presenter on this, but if you have any questions, I think Steve would answer those. But
I do.
okay,
At $25.75 per call for a wildlife service, I'd like to know, because somehow they're keeping track of the numbers, and I think we used to get the breakdown of what kind of calls from them. I would love to see
I think that's there.
more specific than that.
I think there's a
I'd like
breakdown.
to see what kind of animal and what month. Because if we've got a whole bunch of Centerville born and bred deer that are causing our spike in wildlife calls, then I'd like to know that. Or if there are a ton of skunks, like I know there were up in my neck of the woods this past year and the year before, if we can kind of target what kind of animals they are and see what those are.
It's right there. This is on.
Okay,
on
so I
notice.
didn't scroll down far enough. I looked at the other part.
This is the list right here for what it's based on, the wildlife charge.
So is there a way that as a city we could do some education and just say, hey, let's see what we can do to bring our costs down?
Well, there's no deer on here.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
The deer are handled
Robin says
by,
there was a deer call today, but
deer
they
are
wouldn't
handled
take
by
it.
the Division of Wildlife Services, not the county animal control.
Do they not do any deer? Animal control will not do a deer?
Well, I'm not going to say they won't, but I'm just saying there's nothing being charged to us
Okay.
here on this list of wildlife. Generally, the bigger stuff, the elk, the deer, are dealt with by a different agency.
And they don't come at convenient
We
hours.
did see last year that we asked for a breakdown of these wildlife calls by address, and we found that somewhere around 40 of the calls came from the same address. And so I think I had, as I recall, the chief look into that. I don't recall what he reported back, but I mean, we can do that kind of a follow-up. We can get a breakdown by address
Okay,
and see, and have somebody like the police chief go over and talk to them and see if we could get some mitigation somehow in the frequency with which they're calling. Because every time they call and the animal control responds, then yes, it's $25.75.
And I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't allow our citizens to make use of the service. I mean, that is why we contract with them. But if there are things that we can do as a city to decrease our cost a little, and maybe some education, maybe some, hey, don't leave your dog food open for feeding the skunks,
Yeah.
would help to mitigate our costs. So what I'm seeing here is they break it down by, dog bite or this, that, or the other, but I'd really like to see, here are the skunks and here are the, but so that neighbors can see that. I mean, it's good for me to see that, but
So
if we could maybe just take this total and break it down there just like that is, and just stick it in the on the city website, in the newsletter, something like that, and say, we're paying, just FYI, if you're wondering where your tax dollars go, $25.75 for every one of these. Then it might up at I don't know. I'm aware of some situations where not all efforts that could be taken to limit the wildlife are being taken, and maybe if they attach that to the pocketbook.
But you're not, I
Understanding.
assume you're not suggesting that we publish 40 of them came from address XYZ?
No, I'm not, because I realize there are some parts of the city that are just prone to more problems than specific things than others.
But I think there might be some merit in, as staff, identifying where this is, if there are a lot from the
If
same
there are a lot from
address.
the same area or
Some
something.
consultation with that household, perhaps.
Or maybe just, that neighborhood or
Definitely.
something.
Definitely, there's something that you can do a courtesy consult with the owner, because a lot of these, like the nuisance ones with animals, like dogs barking and things like that, some of that is education. Your neighbors tend to be self-policing if they know that, hey, this is a real issue. It costs a lot of money to deal with this. I am surprised that we had so much livestock surrendered. That number was surprising to me.
Was that from Centerville, or was that general to their whole operation? I couldn't tell from the way it
Yeah,
was
I
worded.
couldn't either.
I interpreted
But
that.
those 75 skunk
The
calls.
or if you're talking about the page before, the 329, I believe, is Centerville specific. So is that where you're seeing the wild?
No, up in the staff report,
It's
their.
actually it's on the
thing.
letter. It says 22 livestock.
Oh, that's
27
I
animals
think
total.
that's for their total operation,
Okay,
yeah.
Okay, so that's not the city. Okay.
No.
so Centerville wasn't providing all of that.
Yeah, you
Oh,
got-
no.
You remember the trailer that tipped over on the
herd.
bridge?
4 foxes we lost.
There
Look at
there
that.
was that trailer of cattle that tipped over on the bridge. Do you guys remember that from last summer?
That's right.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Oh, that's
that's
right.
what that is. Mostly.
So weird things skew this. All right, that's helpful.
So how would that, I guess that, never mind.
I would motion that we adopt Resolution 2019-01.
We have
Second.
a second? Great. Roll call vote, Councilwoman McEwen, or Meekum.
Aye.
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 Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
We'll take the assignment to follow up on the suggestions.
Item number 5, financial report for 7-month period. 2 weeks ago, Marcus, you didn't get to be here. We let you get to bed.
Yeah,
So-
I was ready, I was ready to come anytime.
I was going to say, Marcus, you're an hour early.
Yeah, no, we got on the schedule.
Making up for
early.
last time.
So now we're giving you a chance to present.
Okay. Great.
So go ahead.
All right, so this is the 7-month report, January 31st financials. And we'll go right into page 1, the cash position by fund. Notice in December, the general fund cash increased significantly, and that was because of $1.1 million came in property tax. And I mean, that's expected. That's when it comes, is in December.
Most of it.
Most of it, right. And then the RDA, that property tax money should come in March. So we're a couple of reports down the road on that one. Also, as I go through this, I mean, the transportation fund increased quite a bit, but that was because of the Class C money that comes in every other month. Total cash position looks good. The PTIF interest rate continues to increase. It's almost up to 3%. So that's good. The next page, we've got the restrictions on cash. So there's the cash deposits that the city's holding. The water fund cash deposits has decreased significantly because the projects were done. Some of the money was refunded back to the developers, and so that's much smaller than it was. So there's not a whole lot of restrictions in the water fund. And we still just have that one due from between the RDA and general fund, but the
Which
RDA
we'll
money
talk
will
about
come
later
in soon.
tonight.
But any questions on the cash or restricted cash for this month? Okay. And now let's move down into the financial summary. We've got the general fund. Well, overall, things look good. The property tax, most of that has come in. I mean, there's on this report, there's three lines that you kind of lump together. They all come from the county, line 2, 3, and 4. And so if you take the overall budget, that comes out to a little over 1.6 million. We've collected about 1.466 million, and so we have about 165,000 still to collect to meet budget, which shouldn't be a problem. The last 5 months of last year, we collected over 200,000. So property tax, we should be right on target or a little ahead maybe. The sales tax, that's another important one. Right now we're at 60%. The amount that we collect in February is should be another big one because that's December sales, so Christmas time sales. But kind of trying to project that out. If we looked at last year, we received a little over 1.7 million in the last 5 months of the year last year. And this year we need to collect about 1.65 million to meet budget. And so we're probably a little bit ahead of schedule in that also. So property tax and sales tax are looking good. The franchise tax are good. I mean, natural gas is low, but that, we're a couple months behind, so that should start to increase over the next couple months with the colder months. We'll get that franchise tax should increase. Now, court revenue's a little bit low, and most likely that's going to be low for the year.
In fact, I think it'll be perhaps 100,000 low from the budget. So hopefully that'll be made up in the other areas.
Right. Licenses and permits, that's line 11. That's increased significantly mostly because of business licenses have come in December and January. And the intergovernmental on line 12, that revenue's increased quite a bit over the last couple months because of the DUI funds that we receive. But overall, I mean, revenue, we're at 63% in the general fund. Kind of our target is to be around 59% this, 7 months into the year. So things look good on the revenue side. On the expense side in the general fund, I mean, we're trying to stay within that, 58, 59%. You kind of scan through and, I mean, line 24 is a little high, but that's because of the prep fair. The revenue was more than that 11,000, so we came out okay on that.
There'll be a budget amendment to match those up.
And I mean, you'll notice the youth council is over, but really there's not a whole lot to worry on the youth council because they have their own checking account. And so the city has budgeted $7,000, and so every year $7,000 goes from the city's account into the youth council account, and that's all they get from the city. I believe at the beginning of this year they still had $5,000 left over from years of accumulating it. So it is over the $7,000 right now, but it's not that more than $7,000 of the city's money has been spent. And sometimes they spend money and then they have refunds that come in later. So I don't think that's anything to be concerned about. The public works is slightly high, and that's mostly due to salaries and insurance. And I mean, throughout in January there were some payouts of PTO and some retirements and that, so they're going to be a little bit high for some of those departments in the salary.
So let me remind the council what the intent there is. He's talking about the annual buy-downs of leave in January, plus the fact we've had retirements and you have payouts on retirements of a leave. We have a contingency account in the general fund for personnel contingency. And so on the next report, by the time we come back with the next report, our intent is that we will know how much of the expense in each of these departments that's related to those types of expenses, those personnel expenses. We will transfer that expense over to this personnel contingency line. And so that will bring these department salary lines in line with where they should be. So don't get concerned about those being a little bit over at this point.
Okay, and then line 42 is slightly over, but that's due to some repairs and maintenance, some furnace repairs in the, so that's the general government buildings department. But overall in the general fund, the expenditures are at 54%, so we're still under the target. So I think overall we're doing well. But any questions about the general fund budget summary? Okay, move on to the RDA fund. Not a whole lot of revenue. I mean, just there are 2 months of lease payments in there on line 3 from the Performing Arts Center, and some interest in there. On the expense side, it's just the budgeted Utopia and debt service payments that are transferred out, and there's some admin and insurance costs there on line 5. In the recreation fund, line 1, charges for service, about 12,000 of that is from the ski school, so it did pretty popular this year. But other than that, not a whole lot of activity. Most of this is in the summertime. And the expenditure side, I mean, there's some part-time wages and then some computer service charges were allocated to that fund as well. In the RAP tax fund, RAP tax is right on target. It's at 59% on the revenue side. And then the expenditure side is right there, that we take 85% of that RAP tax money goes to the park, 5% to Whitaker, and 5% to the theater, and then the other 5% is allocated later. Little bit of revenue on the cemetery perpetual care fund, mostly some just perpetual care fees. Any questions about those funds? Okay, move on to the debt service fund. No activity in January. The only thing year to date is just some interest payments that have been made. On the park fund, it's just impact fees are low. They're definitely low.
Definitely.
But those are, hard to predict. And
there's only 7 residential units in the current fiscal year to date. So that's 20,000 or so in impact fees. We hope it picks up.
Yeah.
Over 7 months, only 7?
Yep. Mhm.
So,
Sounds like Corey's been on vacation.
and, yeah. The other revenue is just, transfer in from the RAP tax fund. On the expenditure side, the line 6 is community park expenditures from prior months. And line 7 is the Island View remodel expenses. Then in the transportation fund, the Prop 1 money is at 62%, Class C road money is 67%, miscellaneous is mostly interest. And so that fund's doing great on the revenue side. The expense side, line 6 in the transportation fund is some road projects and some engineering costs. And then the annual project is the 2018 slurry seal project.
So this transportation fund section is showing you that 80% of the budget for the transportation fund is spent. Well, that's because of last year's contracts that carried over into this year and used that budget authority. There is sufficient funding to cover this year's projects. It will just require you to amend this budget at some point and appropriate those funds to be available for this year's projects. So don't let that concern you. And then Marcus, can I bounce you back up?
Yeah.
I think you, just so they're on parks, I think you mentioned line 7 is the Island View. Actually, line 8 is the Island View project. That $644,000 budget number you see there represents the city's part. Doesn't represent the grant money, which we would also receive, and of course amend the budget at appropriate time to reflect the grant money when it comes in.
But the grant money is a reimbursement.
That's right.
So,
yes, we will be seeking reimbursement in phases.
okay.
Yeah, you don't have to wait till the end of the project to submit for
Well, that's good.
reimbursement. You can do it in stages.
I was going to say that could really
Yeah.
be the budget.
And then on the Utopia fund, that's transfers in and payments out to the Utopia pledge payments, so everything looks in order on that fund. Now down to the enterprise funds. We've got the charges for service, line 1, that looks a little odd, but what happens in that account? That's where when developers have projects that need to be done to the water system, those projects are done through the city, and so, just a developer can't tap into the water system, and, it's controlled through the city. And so the city receives the revenue from these developers, and then the city, oversees the project and that. And when the project's done, there's typically an amount that either gets refunded to the developer or the city asks the developer to pay more, depending on how the project comes out. And in this fiscal year, there's been quite a few refunds, and so that's caused that account to go into a negative position. But money has come in, it's just more has been refunded from prior year revenue that came in. Now, impact fee in the water fund is doing okay. That's over budget. So we're doing okay there. Miscellaneous is interest. But the operating revenue is right on target. It's at 57%. And throughout this year, we've been about 1% under the estimated. And so I don't think anything's out of the ordinary there. On the expenditure side, there's line 6 is the operating expenses, and that's also at 57% of the budget. So it's right on target. The other ones, lines 7 through 10, are more the capital type projects. Some are those developer funded projects, others are small projects that the city has done. And so those, we haven't spent a whole lot compared to budget on those capital projects, but it looks like there's plans to do several projects coming up. Then in the sanitation fund, that one's right there on target, 57% on the revenues and the expenditures. The drainage also looks on target. I mean, there's line 3, the operating is at 59%. And the expenditures are under budget, but I mean, that money's going to be used on quite a few projects that we talked about just a few minutes ago. Then the telecom fund looks good. I mean, the revenues there and the expenses, you know, the revenue should be slightly higher than the expenses because of the 5% admin fee that we get to keep.
Marcus, can you pause on that one just for a second?
Yeah.
So maybe I've got it backwards. Up farther when you were talking about Utopia and the capital project stuff, I thought that was the one that's the pass-through with the 200,000. So I was curious to know why it's 361 more expense than what's brought in.
Where are you
Am I
looking?
wrong? Up on the bottom of page 5, when we looked at Utopia previously.
Where you're looking at the capital project fund, Utopia?
Right.
It's showing a negative 361.
So there's, let's see,
Oh,
there's
that's
a
just
set
$361.
amount that the city has to pay to Utopia as part of the pledge payment.
Okay, so
And
that one's the pledge
so that's
payment and the other is the
expenditure.
pass-through.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep, that's the pledge, and,
Okay, I got them flipped in my head, thanks.
yep. And so if we go down to the last fund, the Whitaker Fund, not a whole lot of activity here. I mean, the line 4 revenues is the transfer in from RAP tax and general fund. The expenses are some part-time wages and some utilities, so not a whole lot in the Whitaker Fund. But any questions about the summary? I mean, overall, things look good to me with the property tax and sales tax and being within budget. I mean, there's a few budget amendments that'll have to be done, but nothing major.
So, just so I heard you right, you city council has 5,000 in their account,
So
separate of the 7,000 they're allocated?
Let me,
no, go
yeah, I'm not sure you represented that correctly, Marcus, earlier. Anything over the 7,000 city general fund is money that they've asked their youth council to pay towards their activities, or it's money that they've raised through their fundraising activities. So you budgeted 7,000 from the general fund. That's all the general fund money that's spent, even though you see that expenditures have exceeded that. Those additional expenditures would be funds that the youth have paid towards their conference, that kind of thing. Or it would be, there would be their fundraising, like at the Christmas lighting program, they spend that money. So it's gonna need a,
Just to explain, at the end of the year, we'll reconcile.
yeah.
And that will show up as
So,
7,000.
I've made this request before, and I'll make it again, that I'd like the youth mayor to present their budget and to show us their expenditures. I've asked for that before, and I would be able to avoid these sort of
Well,
things.
how often do you want that? Because I think I don't know if they gave you a budget at the
They gave us
September.
a list of activities that they did and number of individuals, but I don't recall seeing their use of proceeds. If we're gonna do government at a youth scale, they should do the other activity that goes with it.
So
Talk
how
about money.
often, though, do you want that? Twice a year?
Twice a year is probably fine. Definitely before budget, because they gotta make their case for budget just like everybody else.
That's a good idea.
But yeah,
So
they're-
they.
Marcus can coach them on how to
Well,
do that, right?
right.
If I remember correctly, I think when they've come in and the mayor has made the report on the past year, I think it includes a financial report, doesn't it? Hasn't it?
I
Hasn't it?
don't recall that
No,
it
I
did.
don't think so.
But we
I don't
can ask,
remember it, but
we can
it's
ask
been
them
a
to do
while.
that.
I don't think they have. I
That-
think they just talked about their activities.
That would be, I think, in May. Now, if you want one before then, we can have them come before then, or we can just say, when you come in May, bring a financial statement that shows the sources of funds and how they were used, so that it also reflects that only 7,000 was used from the
Right.
general fund.
So I would never ask this question if I'd had one.
Okay. So can we, all right, just doing that in conjunction with the mayor's annual report?
I'm fine with it. I'd just like to see it as part of their activity.
I mean, if you look at page 9 of the report, you can see the actual youth council checking account. It shows right now there's a balance of $6,918.90. So that's there in all the reports.
Oh, I'm sure it's there. I just
And
want to be
so-
able to give the youth mayor a grilling and say, hey, are you actually using the proceeds in the same year? Is there a bumper crop year where if you're, hey, 2019, we got extra money, we're doing something bigger than year 2018? Just to give them an understanding of how that level set should be.
Okay.
I mean, I'd love to run a rainy day fund that's almost equal to my annual budget.
Yeah,
That'd be awesome.
yeah.
Recognizing, Steve, it isn't that way, but
Yeah, and I think some of that funding is come from prior year fundraisers, when they used to be required to pretty much provide all of their funding through their fundraisers. And some years ago, it was a decision to, well, let's not make them spend all their time raising money. Let's give them some general fund help. And
sure.
so I think they've carried forward some of that.
And I don't mind buffering that activity, but from year to year, each youth council should enjoy approximately the same level of activities and opportunities, and make sure that financial constraint doesn't apply to one year and not to the next.
Right.
Just general budgeting.
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, the expenses are paid out of there, but then they refund part of it sometime. I mean, it just depends what the activity is.
I see a full
doing,
class
but-
in financial management and budgeting there for them.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. So. Okay,
Thanks.
any other questions? All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, Marcus.
And you're home before 9.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Let's move to item number 6. This is continuing discussion of ordinance 2019-1 regarding the commercial medium zone table of uses in the South Main Street corridor area. I think that there was some request.
Can we take a break before that starts?
Well, that's a good idea.
It sounds like
I think it will be a longer discussion.
needing a break, so it's almost 8:30. Councilman Entz, how long? Not 5 minutes, 10 minutes? What do you need?
5 to 7, I don't know.
Okay, so let's try and reconvene, because we got people here, I know, waiting for this at between 8:35 and 8:40.